Good evening and welcome to the Macro Tourist Hour on BTFDtv. I'm joined by the wonderful and talented David Cullum. Welcome, David.
Hey, dude. How you been lately?
I've been absolutely wonderful. We're actually enjoying some gorgeous fall weather. Now, I know we want to discuss some macro issues this evening. But I normally touch on some politics. Unfortunately, I'm not joined by my partner this evening. He is MIA someplace. He may be in Hanoi. We're not really sure, but we have people out searching for him. He may appear on milk cartons soon. But anyway,
I'm sure there's a chicken involved here.
Anyway, normally what I talk about is I give a little rundown of politics. Now, I think that people having come off the Labor Day weekend are probably a little bit more tuned into politics than they have been all summer and probably will be most of the fall, just because they had a little bit more time. But anyway, important facts are, on the Republican side of the coin, Governor Rick Perry left the election. Much to the dismay of many. Interestingly enough, a prominent author, Brad Thor, who has moved from Chicago down here, was one of his big supporters. But he got absolutely no traction, ran out of money, and he has left. The other thing to point out, of course, is as the polls continue to roll out, Donald Trump continues to do well. People who do follow my stream will note that I refer to Mr. Trump as, I've just kind of shortened it to hashtag rum. You know, I think that pretty much encapsulates it. On the Democratic side, of course, the issue of the day is Hilary Clinton. Her drip, drip, drip. She did come out with the actual words apology, although she keeps talking about her use of a single email versus the server issue, which is really the underlying issue. I think the count of classified emails that have thus been identified is 150, but we have literally thousands to go through. The other important fact that came out today was that the host, the company that hosted the server, said it was impossible to wipe that server. I'm not a technical guy, computer technical guy. I can't say one way or the other. I know oftentimes things are recoverable. We'll see what happens. The only other interesting point I want to hit on before we move on to real topics is there is a looming government shutdown. Typically, this has arisen in the cases of the allowing of the government to take on more debt, which I think the United States is pretty much, I think, the only country amongst major developed countries that has this mechanism. If that's not the case this time, they are talking about actually shutting down the government over the budget process. And the interesting Senator Ted Cruz, who has kind of been following in Mr. Trump's wake, is apparently spearheading that, along with a bunch of Republicans on the House side. So, without further ado, you know, David, I sent you an article earlier, and I did send it out also to followers on my Twitter account, which happens to be IUUBob, at IUUBob. It's a New York Times article that came out today, and I don't know if you had an opportunity to read it, but it's very fascinating. It's the title of the article was "Fed's Policy Mechanics Retool for a Rise in Interest Rates." I'd just like to get your thoughts. I have a couple of questions regarding it that I'd like to follow up on.
Well, on that specific argument, one of the things that struck me is that the news was particularly out of date because they've been talking about doing this thing. They basically are taking money from the banking system, which was infused into the banking system via the Fed, and are now making this bold claim that they're going to tighten monetary policy by paying the banks to not lend it out. And I'd love this job. This has got wool subsidy. corn subsidy. This is classic government subsidy written all over it. I posted it actually after you sent it to me, and immediately got some responses from various characters. Quickly, Zero Hedge picked up on the fact that this was old news and linked to a 2013 article delineating in gory detail, and sort of suggested to me, is this really old news? And of course it's not. And then I actually put out a quote from the article and then titled it New York Times on crony capitalism, which struck me as a fairly benign but very real and accurate. And the next thing that happened is David Andalfato of the St. Louis Fed, who I really enjoy chatting with. I mean, we disagree on everything, best I can tell, although maybe we just argue about the things we disagree on. But I bring him up occasionally, and I do not want to be critical of him because he doesn't have to argue with me, right? He's one of the guys who gets out there and exchanges, talks to the masses, and we really do disagree, but he thought it was a kind of, I think the phrase was idiotic interpretation of what the Fed was doing. Suggested that the Fed was just simply paying interest rates on deposits, right? And I said that it was money given to the banks to deposit, though, and he said no, they bought treasuries, and I responded with they bought a bunch of worthless mortgage-backed securities too, and so that was a dead giveaway. So in any event, that fight didn't get any legs. He and I can go at it for 20, 30, 40 tweets in a row before one of us says, okay, I am so tired, let's go to bed now. And then others jumped in. So that article generated some discussion, even though there really was old news. But now they're talking about it.
I think it was largely old news, but it was nevertheless very interesting to see it encapsulated, in the quote-unquote paper of record, right, in such a kind of a bold fashion. I mean, this was known to perhaps you and I and the people that roll around financial Twitter. But I don't think it certainly wasn't broadly understood by the general public.
Well, so I was thinking of a metaphor, and it's like when your kid sets up a lemonade stand and you give him $1 for about, net value 2 cents of lemonade, right? Yes, you're buying lemonade, but there is a certain charitable quality to your decision to buy that lemonade. So I think that's what the Feds are doing. I'm an outlier. I hear all these people saying that. Well, the other thing I got a lot of attention on earlier is I tweeted the fact that if 1 or 2 rate hikes causes a house of cards to collapse, then it's a house of cards, right? And so what am I missing? If this thing is so fragile, it can't take a minor poke to the jaw, then we're already doomed. And that seemed to get noticed.
Did you get any notable responses from that?
Well, a lot of people agreed. A lot of retweets. Things like that. I guess you interpret that as notable. No one argued the point, unlike the first one. So yeah, I think the Feds are. So my outlier view is they're going to hike.
I mean, I'm a little neutral on that. For me, it's guesswork. I do like to gamble on things that I know something about, i.e. football or basketball, baseball, those types of things. The Fed is a little bit more opaque to me, but I will agree that most of the people that I listen to, most of the people that I respect, and I saw somebody, I believe it was Stock Cats, and I don't know if you follow him. He's kind of
who?
His name is.
Yeah, I know. I have no idea who he is.
I have no idea who he is. I know he's on the West Coast, but he's a very witty guy and a very good guy. Yep. He showed a list. He posted a list earlier today that showed the number of entities, banking entities primarily. Some were mutual funds and fund managers, I guess, that said that a September rate hike was coming, and so I mean I tend to agree with that.
Well, so the other source of support for that idea, one was a Real Vision TV interview of Stephanie Pomboy, and she reminded us that if you think the Fed can't become Machiavellian without warning, you're not paying attention to history. And so, by the way, you notice in that New York Times article they said that they haven't started rate hiking since 2008. That turns out to be wrong. They haven't started since 2004. So something like 50 or 60% of the guys working on Wall Street now have never witnessed a rate hike.
I would suggest it's probably a higher percentage than that.
Right, and so if the Fed, so the other thing, here's what'll happen is I think they'll hike, and I think the market will respond benignly, possibly even favorably, and I think that's for two reasons. One is that might be the sell the news sort of story, although that's a buy the news story. The second is I think when they do stuff like this, they support the markets. So I think they'll have their money managers out there saying, look, the day we hike rates, do not let the markets tank. And if anyone thinks they're not doing that, at this point I think they're dreaming. I think the amount of concerted cooperation to keep markets stable is, we're just a half a notch from China, right?
No, I mean, I don't even know if we're a half a notch. I would suggest perhaps a quarter of a notch, or perhaps just really even. I mean, I think that China just does it in a clearer way. I mean, the way that our Fed operates is just slightly more opaque. Simple as that, I think.
Well, we haven't arrested sellers and we haven't arrested journalists yet.
Not yet.
We did, in the last crisis, announce that naked shorting of financial institutions was illegal, which it was illegal before the crisis too, but they had to remind the Wall Streeters that they actually care now because they don't want their own institutions being naked shorted, which for those who don't know what naked shorting is, it's a very destructive process. So not shorting,
well,
shorting is a fantastically positive process in my opinion.
I mean, I think everything that I've read about the financial crisis and the upticks to the financial crisis was that Goldman Sachs was significantly short.
You cut out a little.
I'm sorry. I was saying that everything I've read about the financial crisis and the precursors to the financial crisis was that Goldman Sachs realized it was coming and started getting short.
Yeah, they were smart guys. Yeah.
They knew they had great exposure to AIG, which apparently insured so much of the, this crap paper that they were sitting on, that they eventually got paid off on because the Fed came in and recapitalized, basically paid out 100 cents on a dollar.
Yeah, that story is misunderstood by many. AIG, Stockman's very clear on this point. I think he's correct. He knows this world well, not just from blogging, but from his professional career. And he pointed out that the AIG derivatives group that got AIG in trouble was legally ring-fenced away from the insurance company, so that AIG, the insurance company, could not have gone down, and that the payouts from the derivatives group would have simply ceased. And therefore, AIG, the company, was not at risk, but Goldman and others who needed the payouts were at risk. And this the lawsuit last year that was finally showed up in court. The transcripts of that lawsuit showed tremendous amount of detail about how much guys like Geithner just refused alternative suggestions because it wouldn't give 100 cents on the dollar. So that was crony capitalism of a higher order too, in my opinion. Undeniable, actually.
I mean, I think that's, I mean, you're really getting to the core of the issue, and I mean, it really intersects quite naturally with politics as well. It is the money that and largely corporate money, really that runs the political system. And indeed the Fed as well, which is, despite assertions to the contrary, is a highly political organization.
Well, that's the other reason, by the way, the Fed's very susceptible to suggestion. 98% of it comes from the banks telling the Fed what to do, so they're ultimately susceptible to the banks because they are the banks. But I think they're susceptible to political pressure, and history has shown that over and over and over. I think they're also human beings, right? I'm not positive that's true. I think they might be trolls, but they're being called wimps, right? And I have this funny feeling that they're going to say, we won't hike it. I'll show you, right? And I actually think the Fed wants to show that they are not at the mercy of the markets, even though they are, and even though they are at the mercy of the banks. I think they're going to want to pretend to be the tough guy. So that's why I think there's a hike coming.
Yeah, just to kind of keep the facade alive. I think.
You've just gone quiet, Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said just to keep the facade alive. Am I still quiet? I see my thing working. Are you not hearing me, David? I don't see you reacting.
You went dead on me. That's why I wasn't reacting. I was just sitting there watching, wondering if we had a technical glitch for the night. What did you say? Just say it again.
I said it's merely keeping the facade alive. That is the Fed's facade of being an independent organization that really controls interest rates with a dual mandate of, I don't know. I absolutely get disgusted even speaking about it, but I had a few other questions I wanted to hit, but I wanted to turn it over to you and see if there are any particular items that you wanted to discuss.
Well, you mentioned politics. I mean, boy, we could go for 3 days on politics. I was so glad to hear that Hillary's decided that her campaign, her major plank will be to get the dirty money out of politics. That was
Oh, yeah. After her 60, as long as it's not her 60 million.
So here's my rant on Hillary. It is not about using unauthorized email servers, although I think the intelligence community is not happy with that, and that may be why she's in a bit of trouble, because they might have said, "Screw that, we're gonna make her pay." And I think Obama's thrown her under the bus potentially, because I think he probably can't stand her because he does have a brain, contrary to some conservative views, and anyone with a brain would be disgusted by her. So I think that's a problem. The sort of subplot of that problem is that she forced people to send stuff to unauthorized email addresses. So she basically dragged the entire U.S. intelligence system into illegal activity by saying, look, screw that. If you don't want to send it to my personal server, you don't get to send it to me, right? And these guys are not supposed to do this. And they know that, and so she's basically soiled an awful lot of people who would rather have dealt with official channels. Now, I have a mixed emotion on this because I also don't think Freedom of Information Act should get us access to the emails of the Secretary of State. That strikes me as nuts, right? The Secretary of State has to do some very delicate things, and that strikes me as the kind of stuff that has to just be kept to her. But if she's mixing up, Clinton Foundation warlord campaign funding, right? And anyone who hasn't read Clinton Cash should probably put it on their reading list sooner rather than later. But as I've recommended before you read Clinton Cash, read Sociopath Next Door, because I think it'll help you understand both Bill and Hillary. I actually believe that they are both clinical sociopaths, especially Hillary, but Bill's got all the trappings, the womanizing, the whole thing, the lack of conscience. And so then you read Clinton Cash and you look at, she's receiving hundreds of millions of dollars from foreign donors. That was never supposed to happen. I've got the statute that was sent to me, and it delineates in plain, simple English what you cannot accept, and that foundation is basically BCCI for the Clintons, right?
It absolutely is, and David, for those that don't know BCCI, do a Google search on that. It is a fascinating tale.
Well, it was the 12th largest bank in the world that was laundering drug money and intelligence money and dictator money. It's basically the bank to the corrupt, And then the whole thing unraveled. Nowadays, it doesn't unravel. That's the problem with BCs. But the Clinton Foundation is this dirty, disgusting organization. So, I've never hated a politician before. I didn't hate Obama. I didn't share his politics, but I got a sort of a warm, fuzzy thought that we have a black president, and this happened in my lifetime, and I got that, and I think Democrats at times are soft-headed, but I think the conservatives go putty-headed they do the whole God thing, and it drives me nuts. I'm not voting for God. I'm voting for a politician, right? I'm voting for a guy to lead the country, but Hillary is a despicable human being, in my opinion. And I think that people vote for solely because they want a female president. Sell your soul if you have to, but I think there's saving a special place in hell for that vote.
Yeah, I didn't really follow up very carefully on today's new polling data that came out, but the interesting thing was, I think it came out Wednesday. I think it was Quinnipiac. Came out still. 71% of Democratic voters support Hillary. I mean, they don't, not against a Republican contender, that is. So 71%. This has had little or no effect. But now the other counterpoint to that, though, however, is that increasingly it is looking like America is becoming 20% on each side, core Republicans and core Democrats, and the rest of us kind of reside in the 60% in the middle, and farther left or farther right within that constituency. I mean, I think, as you well know, having followed me for quite some time, I think they're two political gangs. I mean, I saw a lot of people that I follow who are heavily right, who are just absolutely out of their minds about Boehner and Mitch McConnell over this Iraq deal, which, I don't have a strong opinion. I think that from a political perspective, I think Obama, although I share many of your thoughts, I think that he was not deeply ingrained in the underlying political situation within Washington. Thus, he didn't really buy into it, didn't really do the heavy lifting. I mean, if you look at his first term, certainly, and probably the first 5.5 years of his presidency, he really didn't spend any time with Congress. I mean, Congress is like anybody else. They like to be invited to the White House, have you pat their back, shake their hand, go out and play golf. He was an insular guy, didn't understand the system, and tried to jam everything down their throats. And I think that it was absolutely an idiotic political move. Simple as that.
Well, so I think the problem I have with Obama is really simple. So when 9/11 hit, Bush correctly recognized that it would define his presidency. I think they then went on to completely and utterly screw the pooch, right? But he at least recognized that. In my opinion, Obama failed to recognize what his calling was, and I think his calling was to straighten out the banking system. And instead, what I've called on several occasions, he stitched up a putrid wound and recreated it in its old image, and therefore the thing is still sitting there festering. And I know it's a lengthy, gory metaphor, but I think that was his screw-up. And you can say, well, what control does the president have? Right? And that's a legitimate statement. And what I would say is you can at least step up to the goddamn microphone and say the right things.
Well, it's not only the bully pulpit, but let's not forget, for the first 2 years, he had control of both the Senate and the House. He could have prioritized anything he wanted. And it was much to the consternation. And I would point anybody that wants to learn about the inner workings and what did happen during that time to the Bob Woodward books, which were written, which are also very good on the Bush administration, by the way. But that gives you a lot of the inner workings. And basically, the bottom line is Valerie Jarrett just kind of jammed it down everybody's throat. Told Obama, she had Obama's ear. And she told him, you need a legacy item. And that's why he went to health care ignored the banks.
Yeah, but he screwed that too, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's totally screwed up.
Right.
But understand, there was a process there that was so screwed up that they couldn't get Democrats on board.
But you know what his legacy could have been? His legacy could have been to say to Eric Holder, look, you got to be Ferdinand Pecora Part 2, right? You got to come in, and you're going to have to put together a team of guys, and you're going to have to try to find the real criminals. And for example, I would have given immunity to the second in command of John Corzine, and then I would have hung Corzine out by various body parts, or not, depending on what the second in command would say under immunity. But the famous Holder memo, which basically said no prosecutions, was a fatal move.
But that was driven by Geithner, who said
that might be driven by Geithner, but goddamn, Obama's president.
You'll get absolutely no disagreement from me. But I mean, it was Geithner who was just adamant and said, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't. Don't. Oh, you know what it'll do to the financial system, the underworkings of this country." And what we've had is what the banks went from, I think, in 2007, 2008, to holding roughly, I want to say 73% of deposits in America, to last I saw was 86%. I mean, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So the same companies that brought you down now have been allowed to get bigger. And certainly no prosecution. Although I did see something this past week that all of a sudden they were looking at the banks again for prosecution.
But that's bullshit, though. But that's total bullshit, because the statute of limitations is run out on all the bad stuff.
I would think so.
Let's slam the barn door now. Oh, that'll be a very impressive political move. That's just total bullshit. Take that guy behind the barn and beat him with a bat, right? Whoever came up with that plan deserves a serious bit of whoop asses. I'm getting so pissed at this stuff. But now let's go over to the Republicans, right? Let's be equal opportunity smashers. So we got an election here. What do we got? We got a narcissist. We've got a socialist. We've got a sociopath, right? These are the guys who are in the front. Those are the big three right now, right? So let's look at Trump. I don't think many people are actually supporting Trump for president. You know what they're supporting him for? They're supporting him to stay on stage and keep screwing up the process because they are so goddamn mad at it, right? And the process is so screwed up that it was touch and go whether Fiorina would get on the stage. Now, I'm not sure Fiorina's ready for any political position, but holy cow, how do you keep her off the stage? She's the only one who sounds coherent compared to a bunch of them. And then you say, well, let's take that. Maybe I'm coming from a campus. What about the goddamn sexism? The one chick who's up there, and they're going to keep her on. So they finally, said, oh, got to change the rules, got to put her on the stage. Well, of course you have to put her on the stage, you morons. And I sign off on Rand Paul, but I think he's an imitator of his father. I don't think he has what his dad has. Maybe in 20 years he will.
Yeah. I mean, I frankly, I had handicapped Ron Paul to be a much more effective player in this whole game. Although I'll say this much about Paul, his core constituency, which I think we're basically down to at this point, they're fervent and they're loyal to a fault. So I suspect he stays around a little longer than otherwise one might expect with his terrible numbers. But the rest
Fox News isn't going to leave him on there, right?
Who is it?
Fox News is not going to leave him in there.
No. It's
there is a Republican, right? They both parties take people off stage that are inconvenient, right? Howard Dean got taken off by the Democrats. Ron Paul got taken off by the Republicans in 2008 and then again in 2012. So I'm a big fan of third parties. I'd vote for goddamn Ralph Nader. And the reason is because my vote would show up as disgruntled. So my vote counts. My vote counts. I'd vote for Kanye at this point. My vote counts.
I will tell you, Dave, unequivocally, since 2008, that's exactly what I've done. I vote in every single election. I just absolutely refuse to vote for either of the two criminal gangs. I won't vote for a Republican. I will not vote for a Democrat, irrespective. Even if I think they're good people, because they're just part of a system, and the system is dead broke. The only time that representatives, whether they're in the House, the Senate, that they care about the voters is when they're running for office. That's it. The only time. They care not. It's this inconvenient process that they have to do to deal with you and me. I mean, the funniest thing was like last election when Pat Roberts had all that trouble in Kansas. Senator Pat Roberts, long-time senator from Kansas. Of course, he was living in Northern Virginia. He rented a room, supposedly, in a house that he apparently had let slip for a number of years and had not been renting it. Then we had to re-rent it because it was called into question. But meanwhile, the wife is running a real estate business in Northern Virginia. I mean, come on. These people are absolute criminals. They're criminals.
Yeah, but not as criminal as Hillary.
I mean, she brings it to a whole nother level. Her level of arrogance is absolutely unbelievable.
And by the way, her email scandal is not using a server that was unauthorized. It was a scandal. There's actually a good summary of her email scandal that I thought was pretty balanced. But the scandal was, to the extent she tried, scrubbing emails under subpoena. Excuse me, that gets you jail time.
Well, having read the subpoena, I think there's a colorable claim that she was supposed to produce emails related to the matter at hand. Now,
and how about the emails that are all over that server of hers that she didn't? And by the way, if you're under subpoena and you're told to produce emails and you produce the relevant ones, you don't also get to go scrub all the rest.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think your leap is just a little bit far. I mean, while absolutely rational, I don't think it's legally possible. Necessarily.
And then just in case your readers are behind schedule, let me point out two things. One is Hillary, in her first job, I think it was, as she was an intern for the Watergate hearings, got fired on an ethics violation. I have no idea what it was, but she got fired on an ethics violation. That piece of slime has been an evil dudette. Her cattle futures trading was in '78. Right? She was just a young punk, and she was already scamming the system, doing 20 sigma cattle futures trading.
She made so much. What she put up was, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say she put up about $1,500 and made like $60,000 or $80,000.
100,000. 100,000. She made about a 70 bagger off cattle futures trade. So she's crooked, and let's not forget Whitewater, right? Let's not forget all these things. And so she's been a criminal the whole way. Yet there's people who support her. It's like, holy cow, if someone's that much of a criminal, I'm finding someone else. I'm writing in a vote for some guy, with Nurse Ratched, right? I mean, that's it. I'm not voting for a lesser of evils when they're that evil.
Oh, so. No. She's absolutely atrocious. I really don't understand. I don't understand why Democratic support. And again, this is against ex-Republican candidate, whoever that might be, hasn't diminished more. I expect it will. It will continue to diminish because despite her assertions where she kind of leveled it up and I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. Now I'm sorry about this. Okay, now I'm sorry about having these emails. I mean, come on. This thing is going to drip, drip, drip till January. That's the problem.
Right.
And if you think for a minute, and nor would I if I were in their shoes, that the Republicans in the House are going to take the foot off the gas, think again. It ain't happening.
I don't know. There's one place where the Republicans took their foot off the gas, and it sort of showed me how corrupt it was. The Marc Rich scandal was where Bill pardoned Marc Rich, and it turns out that it seemed like a good scandal. But what I went and searched presidential pardons, and at that point in history, one of the top links was a list of every pardon of every president ever. And Bill Clinton's pardons, there were over 1,100 of them. Right. And they were all either in the category of some sort of money laundering, bank fraud, or drugs. Drugs. Including a guy who was in prison for smuggling 800 kilos of cocaine. Right? Now, the Republicans didn't go after them, and the question is why, and the answer is because they're faking it. It's kabuki theater. They're like dogs fighting who don't want to draw blood.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but the president's immunity power is that's my son yelling at his computer game upstairs. But the president's immunity powers are spelled out in the Constitution. I mean, he clearly has the right to do that.
Oh, he has the legal right to. But
absolutely.
But let me ask you this: does that in any way mitigate the legality of someone paying him to do it? And I bet you not. So I bet the fraud was committed on the quid pro quo, right? So he has the immunity powers, but if he's doing it and getting paid for it, he doesn't have the right to. That's
unequivocally. I mean, now the interesting thing, I will point you, if you have not read the details of that Marc Rich case, that is a fascinating study in and of itself. You know who led the prosecution against Mr. Rich?
Oh, let me guess, Jim Rickards.
No. No, he was in the private sector. No, this was
a funny guess.
This is a man you know. He has run for president. Was a prominent guy. Was a U.S. prosecutor in
Giuliani.
Giuliani brought the suit.
So here's one for your readers. If your listeners want entertainment value, you go to YouTube and you search for a documentary made in 1993 called Clinton Chronicles. And what makes it so hard to watch is two things. One is that it's very low budget, so it's got this spooky quality about it. The second thing that makes it creepy is they're interviewing everybody from Arkansas. So you're going, is there someone out there who doesn't speak like they're from Arkansas? Now, but here's the funny part. After an hour and a half of listening to this, you've heard more political hacks and more prosecutors and more judges accuse the Clintons of crimes of an unbelievable magnitude, including smuggling heroin into Mena, Arkansas. And you're going, either they have found 25 or 50 people willing to just hammer the Clintons, or these guys, and Mena, Arkansas is supposedly a choke point for the heroin trade. And one guy sitting there and he's being interviewed and he says, I'm doing this and this and this, and then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I realize that we're bringing heroin in, and I got the fuck out of there, right? The Clinton Chronicles is the weirdest documentary you've ever seen.
How long is it?
It's what?
How long is it?
About an hour and a half, and they're just banging on them. It goes into everything, so it makes it seem like the Clintons were Tammany Hall on steroids in Arkansas. So
well, that's worth the price of admission tonight.
Oh yeah, it's entertaining.
Let's, Hillary. We go on and on about her. I think Bernie Sanders. He appeals to a very niche crowd. He's not going any place. Martin O'Malley, he couldn't find. Trump.
Let's go to Trump. Come on, let's go to Trump.
I was going to say, let's move to the Republican side of the coin because that's interesting too. Although, before we leave Arkansas, moving to the Republican side, let's talk about the huckster. And the huckster, there are some stories about that guy too.
You know, I don't know those.
Oh, my God.
The problem I have is that I'm not a religious guy, and I don't have problems with religious guys. In fact, I've read a ton of medieval history, and it's pretty clear to me that contrary to what we get sold about the Catholic Church being this oppressive thing, they were kind of the voice of reason in a period of chaos, right? And they kept the nobles in check. And so I've really softened on Catholicism and on religion as a guiding force for civilization. I'm still not religious. But I don't want to have every single candidate from a party I'd like to be a member of, you know, talking like a minister. And because that's not what it's about, in my opinion, and that's the fight they're fighting, and it's just driving me bananas. So until they cut the God talk, I'm not going to support them.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, the fact is, there's a job to be done that has, you know, if you want to talk about your religion, that's perfectly fine. You know, or if you want to be religious, that's perfectly fine. Do it on your own.
Yeah.
It's your own business. It's not my business. None of my business.
What I want is a person who's worried about fiscal conservatism. And, you know, Jimmy Carter got interviewed, and someone tried to drill him on being a lousy president or a wimp or something, and he said, during my administration, we didn't drop a single bomb or shoot off a single missile. And I'm listening to this, I'm going, he's right. We have, you know, I'm not a wimp. And I understand why you need a strong military, but we have caused the death probably in the last decade. Must be, what, 5 million people? Someone explain to me what we're getting for 5 million deaths. You know that, you know, and you can go back to the Twin Towers. You can say, oh, but they killed 3,000 people. I'm going, excuse me, we lost 4 times that on Omaha Beach.
Well, we lost more than 3,000 in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Oh, my God, yes.
That's a simple fact.
I want a conservative who says, I want someone who says, look, we're protecting the Western Hemisphere. I want to go back to that. And I want a conservative.
The Monroe Doctrine.
You eat what you kill, not what you borrow. I want a Goldwater conservative.
Wow. Now that's a blast of the past. Google that, kids.
I'll take a Reagan. Reagan paid lip service to religion, but never did anything.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But you know, I mean, but I think it has become, for whatever reason, because of the strength of the religious conservatives within the Republican Party, it has become kind of a litmus test of sorts. I think few politicians have the time to be truly religiously committed anyway. You know, I mean, there are some, clearly there are some, but I mean, not amongst the notable political.
So let's talk Trump.
Let's talk Trump. You know, Trump is an interesting character. You know, I have a little bit of connection to him. I've never met him. But do know him very, very well, and grew up professionally in the New York, New Jersey area. So while he really rose to prominence, and I would suggest to anybody, go to Google Books, look up Spy magazine, SPY. It was a great sardonic, ironic magazine, humor magazine, written in the mid-80s through, I think, like 86 or 87 through about 93. Anyway, they absolutely ate up Trump. And there is more good stuff in there. They roiled Trump's ass so bad.
But he doesn't care.
He does care.
He doesn't care.
No, he does care, you know. But the thing is, this whole thing about him being a property developer, he's not a property developer. He's a brand guy now. He sells a brand.
No, you know what he is? He's a pain in the ass of the system that you hate.
I don't.
Trump fan. People who support Trump aren't voting for Trump necessarily. I'm not going to pull the lever on Trump in all probability, but I love the fact that he's center stage. I'm going to that debate is going to be so much fun because he's going to be in there and we're going to get full Trump. He is going to be so powerful in that debate, and you're going to watch the Republicans and they don't know what to do. And if only we could get a Democrat. Of course, Hillary's doing it to herself, so that works fine. But Trump is just pure reality TV entertainment. And did you see him on Jimmy Fallon? He was great.
I only saw brief pieces of it, but I did see it, and it was hilarious.
Well, when he says to Trump, he says, "How are you going to create jobs?" He says, "I'm just going to do it." He says, "How are you going to do it?" He says, "I'm just going to do it." Right? And he's just got this screw you attitude that's just so hysterical. How do you beat that?
I love him. I think the interesting thing to point out, though, David, along these same lines is I couldn't believe, political commentators, and it was virtually everywhere in early July, were writing him off from the get-go. And that's it. His comments about McCain, well, that's it. His comments about that, that's it. Like everything. And now they finally have given up. They finally given up because they don't get. They realize they don't get it. Or, they don't get the simple statement you just made.
But they don't get the fact that the average Joe is loving the fact that he's swimming in that pool and defecating. That's what he's doing. Yeah. It's fantastic to watch this. He'll sit there and he'll hammer the Hispanics like Archie Bunker, and then his ratings will go up. And it's just
they love me. That's what worked for me.
I think they think you're watching All in the Family or something. That's great stuff. Now this is the guy angry at Trump for missing the plot.
He is the proverbial Tootsie Roll in the pool from Caddyshack.
So here's what happens. Here's my prediction. It's not a big bold one, but I think Biden slips in with Warren on his coattails. And I think when given the choice we're looking at, Biden, who's pretty much a sponge brain, but Warren has people's attention, I think that becomes the Democratic ticket.
I really can't disagree with that. That has been that's been floating around for a couple of weeks now. Ever since Biden's office leaked to everybody that he was flying back to the White House early and meeting with Warren, which was a secret meeting, so to speak.
But Warren was also lurking. So what was noticeable about Warren is that she was saying nothing. And so someone obviously said to her, "You just stay out of harm's way for now. We may need you sooner rather than later." That's my guess.
Well, let me tell you what. Here's the big issue for Biden or Warren is superdelegates. Something Hillary paid no attention to in 2008 that Obama focused on like a laser beam. Locking up superdelegates. She's already locked up a ton of superdelegates, which means all that means is that she may have to absolutely crater, poll wise and or legally wise.
No. What she needs to do is be told by the power structure, by the way, Hillary, you're going to develop a health problem and you're going to get the fuck off the stage. You're going to stand up at a microphone and do a scream or two, and then we're going to take you down. And you're going to go quietly, or we will unleash the hounds, and we will release your emails, and we're going to prosecute you, so get off stage.
Yeah, it's hilarious, but I think a lot of what you're saying is absolutely true. I think, Joe Biden, as you know, I gleefully refer to Joe as Dopey Joe. Dopey Joe graduated. Dopey Joe. You didn't know that?
Joe what?
Dope. You didn't know that? Dopey Joe is my hashtag for Joe Biden.
No, I didn't. I wasn't.
But anyway, you realize that Joe Biden graduated from Syracuse Law School.
He did.
Right?
I didn't know that.
Yes, he did. He managed to graduate 77th out of 83 students.
That's really quite a stellar performance.
That is a law school performance made for politics.
Oh my God.
That's unbelievable. Anyway, we've gone about an hour. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? It's absolutely. I want to first. Well, you go ahead.
I've seen the markets get shaky and get retrieved multiple times. This one feels more dubious to me. I think China's a fascinating story. It's just like they're saying, look, we can't hike rates with things the way they are. And I'm going, you can't hike 25 basis points? What kind of disaster are you running here, right? China, their market had lost 3 months worth of appreciation, and there was total panic. There's something fundamentally wrong when that's the case. If you can't give up 3 months of gain, I mean, what's going to happen when you give up 20 years of gain, like in the Nikkei, right? And so, but I think the story in China must be the banking system collapsing, although I don't have any hard data on that. The other thing for me this year, it's been a very difficult year because there's so many things that I just can't understand well. So the Iran deal, I don't have the bandwidth to really understand that. I thought I understood Putin and the Ukraine and Crimea. I thought I could do that. The Iran deal, I don't get. Greece became so complicated to me because to me the simple story is Greece defaults BFD, right? Put them on BFDtv. And then they had the referendum that looked like they were basically saying, look, we're doing it, and then nothing. So Greece is basically a big kabuki theater. And then you got China, which is an impenetrable mess. But I think their system is collapsing in a sort of a serious way. Amazingly, if you take Japan, 1945 to 89, it's 44 years. China, 1973 Nixon, they start opening, to 2015. What's the math on that? 42 years. That's an interesting, is that the life expectancy of an emerging market to superpower to collapse? I don't know. But I think China could do it. I think the energy sector can do it. So we've got this situation right now where all these markets are wildly oscillating. And that's metastable. You're asking for a pileup. That's, cars in a fog, waiting to turn into a mess.
Well, what I've seen in the markets, because I'm in every day, and I've kind of moved from where I used to be a day trader to more of a swing trader. It's quite clear to me that a lot of the rules have just completely broken down of late. And that is, during the day, what you see is HFTs just sit there and push prices, sit there and run stops on either edge. And you better know where you're getting in and know where you're getting out, because I agree with you. The oscillations are incredible. I think China not only has economic problems, but pending political problems. I mean,
right.
What's going to happen if these economic problems actually reach fruition and emanate? It's going to have enormous consequences, because so many people have migrated from the inside of the country to the shores, where all the businesses are, and they don't want to go back. And I expect China is going to start telling them go back, because there is no export demand, or the export demand is so dried up, it's horrendous. So I mean, I think that they are, world of hurt.
And how long before they pick a fight with Taiwan or with Japan or with the United States off their coast or something? How long before that turns into a military mess? Not long.
Well, I mean, I think that's difficult. One of the things interestingly about China was that they let go an enormous number of troops that they said they no longer need them. So I think that China has decided that that their best way to battle the U.S. and or any foe is really through data.
Right. Oh, there's all sorts of ways. And even if they're not attacking us, everything that happens, we blame them anyways, either China or the Russians, you know. And so, no, it seems very metastable to me. And you know, we've gone through these little oscillations. I was talking to Eric Hunsader, who we've been on a few times together, and he had a bird's eye view of the what they call Black Monday. It wasn't Black Monday; it was Black and Blue Monday. And he saw the wild instability that was in the markets that day, and so that day didn't do a lot of price damage, but the evidence of market instability was enormous apparently, and I just think right now we're like a car fishtailing down the road, and on average we're pointed in the right direction, but the tail end keeps going back and forth, and one of these days we're going to end up in a telephone pole.
I heard a guy that has been a market professional for about, I don't know, 16, 18 years, who said, you know, he wants the market to fall.
Oh, I do too.
Because he says, you know, and it's absolutely, and this is for people that have only been in the market a short time, that have only followed it since you know, this ramp up. But the fact is that the economy is not the market. The market is not the economy.
Right.
You know. And the economy will continue, but what you've had here is a Fed-induced rally of free money. It's just free money.
You invest this market. The prices are wrong. So,
right.
So I'm sufficiently in cash. I'm 65% cash. I tweeted today something about how how a friend said, "Can you stand being in cash for a couple more years?" And I said, and I wrote, "Why not?" And I don't think the opportunity costs of being in cash right now are consequential because everything's so overpriced. But I'm not losing anything. Maybe it'll look like I am. But at some point, that cash, you know, during the Great Depression, you could get bargains in 33, 34. You could buy up the world for pennies on the dollar, but you didn't have any money. If you're like everyone else, you were broke. That's why everything was so cheap. So you've got to have cash. And the only way you have cash is sit on it when it doesn't feel right. I know others who have it. I got in a quick discussion with Taleb, who's a smart bastard. It's clear he buys the cash model. He's a big fat tail guy, so he buys. I know Grant Williams is a big fan of cash. His buddy Raoul Paul is a big fan of the dollar in particular. I'm not quite convinced of that story, but I do think, you know, when it's time to liquidate assets, someone's got to own them, and therefore you can't get out. Some people can get out, but society can't get out of these overpriced assets. Society's got to lose.
No, I don't disagree. Well, you know, David, we've exceeded our time limit. I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'd like to invite you back sometime very soon because I think because I think we're going to see an inflection point here coming up. You know, this market volatility has clearly re-entered the market, and to me, it's very interesting. And certainly, the political situation will continue to go on. So I can always jabber about that for.
So if you're willing to still take requests, I got a couple of guys I would love to talk to.
All right, hang on a second. Let me say goodbye to everybody on BTFDtv. Thank you for joining us. Have a nice evening.